Welcome back, guys. Today I want to talk to you a bit about acquiring land for your off-grid cabin. So having land is something that's been really important to me. Having that connection to land is extremely important to me. And years ago, my spouse and I were looking at houses and properties and things like that, and really taking our time to figure out what we wanted. We're from Ontario, and certainly we wanted to have property in Ontario, but it can be difficult to find just what you want. So how do you go about finding that property of your dreams? Well, first off, we always kept an open mind, and we're looking at different sources to find land. So things would be, word of mouth, sort of taking a drive in the countryside, taking a look at properties that were signed. Don't discount it, but online classifieds like Kijiji. There's also some companies here in Canada that specialize in selling, bush lots and things like that. The one I'm familiar with is Dignum. We looked at all those different options, went on a lot of drives. We first went out with some realtors to look at properties and homes and really just didn't find what we were looking for. So next we went to the online classifieds. Everything that's been really good in my life has come through online classifieds. Cars, places to rent, and actually this land came from Kijiji. So essentially this property was private sale. There was no realtors involved, and that may make some people a bit nervous. Realtors have a lot of experience in dealing with sales, and certainly there's a lot of issues to consider when buying a private piece of property. However, we were up for the challenge, and we elected to go ahead with private sale. But obviously I had to do a lot of research into the property. Once we found it, contacted the previous owner. We both of us retained lawyers in order to, of course, draw up the paperwork. It's important to work with someone who has good references, like a lawyer or a realtor. And certainly you can get recommendations from friends. Our lawyer's recommendation literally came off of Twitter, and I did a little bit more research myself. Something to consider with land that's for sale is, is it what you want? Do you want water access? Do you want bush lot? Are you going to be hunting? What's the purpose of your property? Do you want a trout pond on it? Are you able to build on the lot? Make sure that you understand the zoning of the property and what you're able to do with it. If it's zoned commercial, you may be able to have a business. If it's rural, certainly you could have a farm on it. If it's residential only, you may not be able to have a farm or to hunt on it, obviously. So this property is definitely a rural property, and so anything goes for this land as to what we want to do with it. One important thing is to get a survey of the property that you're going to be buying so that you know all the boundaries of it, all the features of the land. Some communities, municipalities actually have graphical information service information on the land. Is there crown land abutting it? Are there mines nearby? What would the use of this property be? And what's around it? Who are your neighbors? Things like that. So there's definitely a lot of online tools that you can use and that we have used to scope out this property prior to purchasing it. It is 170 acres, so it covers a lot of territory, and what we found out is that there's crown land that abuts against this property, which was ideal for us to have all that extra space behind us for exploration. Another thing is to look at the property that you want to purchase in a few different seasons before you purchase it. You want to find out if there's low-lying areas, using ministry data, using aerial shots like Google Earth to find out, does it look like there's a swamp somewhere? You don't want to buy land that is completely, half underwater for most of the year if that's not what you're looking for. Especially if you want to build here, you don't want to have to bring in all kinds of fill to build your cabin or your home. So the previous owner was very generous and allowed us to walk the property not only in the winter but in the springtime before we bought the property, and that made a huge difference in knowing what we were getting into. And certainly one thing I noticed was that it certainly was a bush property. There's a lot of dead trees down. It had been logged in the past, but not overly excessively. So, I wasn't looking for a pristine woodland environment. I want a lot of wildlife around, and certainly that's what I got. And I knew I was going to get that just because of the woods. They're newly regenerating after the logging, lots of critters in there, and you could certainly see the tracks in the snow when I went through here in the wintertime. I remember the first time coming through here in the property in the winter, the snow literally up to my thighs, so I knew it'd also be a good recreational property for snowmobiling. It's important to do your research when getting a property like this that you really don't know a lot about. Like I said, looking at aerials, Google Earth, the township's geographical information system data on the area, so you can know what's around you. I actually called Northern Development in Mines. This area, we do have the possibility to mine for marble and things like that. I wanted to be 100% no one was going to come on the property and start staking a claim for, for minerals and stuff like that, because then when that happens, I really have no recourse. With our Crown patent, we do not own any of the large pine trees, or we don't have the mineral rights to the property, so I want to be 100%. There was nobody that already had a stake in what was on the property who might be paying us a visit to do a bit of mining. Make sure your property is accessible. This property is accessible a few different ways, and that's really important. So if you're looking for something with road accessibility, when there's the roads plowed year round, you want to make sure you find that out. Do you have legal access to your property, or do you have an easement, or is there a deeded access to your property? You want to make sure you know all about that before you jump feet first into buying something. We also, before looking at this property, looked at another property that was abutted by 4 other owners of other properties surrounding the area, so we would have to get permission to cross their land to get into that property. And some people, that'd be fine, they let you do that, but is that actually in the deed to your land? The other properties change hands, and the other owner, there is no legal access to that property, and they cut you off. Well, that's a huge issue. Now you're going to court to get that access again. So really important to do your research. Do you have access to your property? Are there any stakes or claims on your property before you buy it? Is there anyone else that may have an interest in the property? Is there a lien against the property? Things to find out. And that's, your lawyer can actually help you with that. We did a lot of background research just myself alone, but it corroborated with what the lawyer found out as well. So very important to find out that information. So how we got this property was pretty interesting, and I don't think anybody else is ever going to be able to get this kind of property the way we did ever again after what we went through. One thing with property in Ontario, to purchase it, you have to own another piece of property, basically a house, that you can put a lien against it if you want a mortgage for land. They don't typically give you mortgages for land, in which we required. We didn't know that off the bat. We ended up with someone at the bank who was inexperienced and had said, yeah, this is no problem to mortgage the land. Long story short, it wasn't okay, but because there have been several major mistakes made by a huge bank, I'm not going to say the name, they ended up having to give us the money in the form of a couple of different formats of loans to make up the difference in the cost. But long story short, a property without services like this one, people like ourselves that don't have, we don't own a home, to have put a second mortgage on the house basically to buy the land, they're not going to give you the money for it. They certainly want to see a property that has services, has a well, has a home on it, because the bank at the end of the day really wants to resell your land if you cannot pay for it. If you can't come up with the money for your monthly mortgage payments, they want to be able to sell the land and make their money back. And how are they going to do that? Land with a house on it, with services. A lot of people don't want bush lots. So, if we were to default on any of the loans for the property, they likely wouldn't be able to sell this property for very much and get their money back on it. So my advice, we came about this land and got it financed in a way that's completely atypical due to some major mistakes made by the bank. But because of that, they actually had to deliver on their promise that they actually made to us. So we have a very strange setup to pay them back for this property. It all worked out in the end, but it's never going to happen for anybody else. Not a lot of people understand or respect the idea of wanting to get land and preserve it. And, quite often I went to several banks. They looked at me like I had 2 heads, like why on earth would I be doing something like that? Nobody would want this. Why do I want the money from them to do this? They didn't understand it. So the banks just are not set up for that. So really important to consider that when you're looking for land. Make sure you have the money, and if you do need the loan, you're really going to have to either mortgage your house, get a loan from somebody else, or have a property that has a lot of services and a home on it that is resaleable should you default on your loan. Now that you've done all your research, you've retained, professional help to decide that this property, is okay, it is what you want it to be, there's been a survey done, or you trust the previous survey that has been done, you make an offer. So obviously that's done through lawyers or your real estate agent, and we made an offer through our lawyers because we did private sale. And really important in that offer, say what you want to pay for the piece of property. Make sure your offer is contingent on financing. We went through a lot with, at the very last second actually, with that financing disaster with this land. And we were so happy that we would have had an option to back out, and we almost had to because of banking errors. Very important to put that in your offer. And also any other things that you want to consider. You know, we also put a statement in there saying that the previous owner had no knowledge of that someone was going to stake a claim in regard to mineral rights on the property, or that nobody in their friends or family had any other special access to the property or would have wanted that access. You know, for example, maybe they had told several hunters or other people they could come on the property anytime they wanted. We wanted to make sure they had nothing to hide in regard to previous arrangements that we had to made in the property, and they had to sign that they did not have any known information in regard to that. The other thing we wanted in there, and we were granted, was that we had to be able to walk the land. We'd originally put the offer in the dead of winter, and our lawyer strongly advised us to take a look at it in the spring to make sure there was no flooding or any other surprises. And so certainly we could have backed out if we came in the spring and we saw there was just like, you know, 50% of it was just a swamp. I would have said, I don't think so. So we had that in our offer as well. So anything else that you think would be super important to you that you would just back out in a heartbeat, make sure it's in that offer. And then that sort of went back and forth between us and the previous owners. Then we were both satisfied with the stipulations that we each had for each other. We signed. And in 2013, in June, we became official property owners. And in September, we started building the cabin. I hope this helps you out. I mean, this is a story that I really haven't told before, how we got the land for the property, but there's a few tips and tricks in there that may help you. If you have any tips or tricks for others who are looking at buying land for cabins or just a recreational property, put it down below in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. I hope you have a wonderful week as always. Take care.